And when they created this system, what they say, they said that people marry the legal money of the state and cannot but help think that this would not regain some of its value into the future, but it never does. And that is by design. So I can't tell you when, but I can tell you that I'm rushing as fast as I can to get everything as completed as I can, because it could happen anytime. That's how fragile this system is. Honestly, it could happen anytime. And I got news for you, but the BRICS are as fragile as the US. This is a global issue. Nobody, nowhere is going to be immune from this, which is why it is so important to create these communities so we can come together and get through this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, we finally see it, the dovetailing of climatic events that are affecting food production, the economy starting to get into a bottleneck where we're all feeling it, we're all seeing it, we're all in this just grip of inflation where our dollars are worth less and less. And at the same time now, the new fact checker services come out and this complete grip and control of information where even if we want to talk about these problems and causations of where our world is now and where we might see it going is going to be stifled. So, I always try to bring the brightest minds on here to try to get a better understanding of food, economy, and the world we're living in and these cycles that we keep repeating again. Lynette Zang from ITM Trading joining us today. We have many things in common on getting prepared for these changes. Mm-hmm. And I cannot believe it. Just when we were going to have our talk here just a few days ago, it came out and now all these mask mandates are on again at universities, Hollywood studios, and me, I'm close to Georgia because I'm in Tennessee. All down in Georgia, the state of Georgia at the universities are going to be starting mask mandates again immediately.
Oh, wow.
Just one state away. Yeah. So I'm starting to hear about it here, that a lot of that news just trickles over into, and especially if you go to the Chattanooga newspapers, they're picking up both sides of the state borders there. So we're back at it again. And this rest of the year into next year, there's going to be a lot of changes. I mean, more than we've seen so far, I think. So, Lynette, the floor is yours, really. I had a few questions that I wanted to ask you, but it was more about if these mandates come back, really how are mom and pop businesses going to be affected, and those new businesses that have opened since the pandemic ended. I mean, where is this going to take the economy to? I think we're just going to get hit like with a sledgehammer on the head, but that's just me. Maybe I'm a simpleton.
No, actually, you are anything but a simpleton, David, and I'm very happy to be here because I love you. And I love your work, and a lot of your work has influenced what I've done, so I really appreciate that. But they've been working on destroying the middle class really intensely since like the 2000s when they allowed Amazon to come out and not charge state taxes, so not charge taxes, and they didn't have to even make a profit. So I think this is, there's not very many mom and pops left in the system, and I think this is just about killing it off. Because then this is all about surveillance and control. Everything that they're doing is about surveillance and control. And by them, I mean governments and the central banks. Yeah, I think it's a sledgehammer. And what we're also seeing, which is kind of interesting, is all of these recent downgrades in the banking sector. They wanted us to think that that was all over back in March and April, and they had it under control. And now it's rearing its ugly head again. I mean, we had another bank go out, but we just had what was it, Moody's that downgraded like 10 banks or so, and today S&P came out and talked more about they're joining the bandwagon to downgrade. And the reason why I think that that is even more significant than some people might take it as is these are the guys that pay the grading services to give them good grades. Because the higher the grade, the less interest that they have to pay. So if they're turning around and downgrading them now, I'm thinking that it's more about them saving face and that things are a lot worse than we have any idea of in the banking sector.
Yeah, it was actually one of the notes that I'd written here, the USA credit downgrade and then the US bank downgrades. I mean, really, how much of an effect will that have, globally, the way that those look inside the United States for possible investment? It's more about our dollar too. Like I go to the store and, I grow an enormous amount of my own food and I buy meat from the Amish. I raise my own sheep. We got, different kind of birds out here, from the turkeys to the ducks to the geese and the chickens. But for me to go into a store like a farm store and bags of feed just keep going up in price, it's like I'm almost going to need to start growing my own several acres of, buckwheat or different kind of grains so I can feed the animals.
Yep.
Without getting stung. And, this high, it's all, it's going into noticeable. Literally, I kid you not, every time I go in now, it goes up in price because we go in about monthly to buy the feed, but every single time for at least the last 3 or 4 times, it's gone up.
Well, there are a couple things in that I would like to comment on. The first thing is the U.S. downgrade, because up until just recently, don't hold me to these numbers, but I'll get you pretty close. About 48% of global government bonds were AAA rated. Today, you've got, it was either 4% or 6% are AAA rated. So the whole world drowning in debt, does that matter? What you're really seeing is the inability for even governments, even the US, to pay their debts. All they have to do is go in the back and print the money that they need to pay them, and they're still getting downgraded because there are concerns as to whether or not they actually will pay their bills or not. So you're seeing this on a global basis for sure. The other thing about the inflation and the prices, we've had over the last year and a half, we've seen global central banks raise rates at a very rapid rate, but it takes 12 to 18 months to work through the system before they get the results that they're going to get from it. So while on the one hand, we're watching the headline inflation go down, that's more about oil, energy prices going down. That's what that's about. The food inflation, as you indicated, that hasn't gone down. And now what we're seeing on a global basis is where the headline inflation had been going down, those numbers had been going down, that's shifting. And so the tools that the central banks have at their disposal to even relatively control inflation, and I say it like that because they're the cause of the inflation and it was baked into the very system. But they're losing control and they're losing confidence. And that's the only thing holding this system together is the public confidence. Because the markets, remember that saying, don't fight the Fed? Well, the markets are fighting the Fed. They don't believe the Fed. The Fed has lost credibility and they're fighting for it. And that means that they're willing to do pretty much anything. We're going to see what they're willing to do in order to regain that credibility. But pushing rates up and keeping them there longer as the bond market and what's happening throughout the global banking sector with all those government bonds and all that debt that they issued at a 0 interest rate, with rising rates, all of those market values are in the dumper. And I believe it was Danielle DiMartino Booth that recently came out with a piece showing that 91% of investment grade bonds are below par. In other words, they're underwater from when they were issued. Now, is that about their ability to repay, or is that about the interest rates going up and the market value of the bonds going down, or is that a combination of the two?
The ultimate combo, because I've seen you talk about also, you know, the push into CBDC. So once this collapse comes, will we notice it as in like a full global contagion, or will it just be a swift in the night kind of swap over to the CBDC system? And what's going to happen with the mortgages? Because I've had a couple of people ask me this to ask you, because they knew I was going to talk to you here. If the mortgages are rewritten into a new central bank digital currency, like a FedNow account or a Fed dollar, they don't know the proper name for it yet. How do you say no to that? But how do you also prove that the mortgage is void and null because the bank broke the contract by requiring payment in a different medium, a different exchange medium than what your property or your home was first taken out in that lien/mortgage?
Well, for one thing, there is language written into those big, huge, thick mortgage contracts that nobody reads, but just initials, initials, initials that actually allow them to switch. So that is completely a legal thing for them to do. However, when they do that, remember, they want your cooperation. They don't want you to fight them. They want you to go along with it. So how do you get people to just go along with it? Well, think back to what happened in 2008, because that is a great example of it. And more than likely, no, they're not going to just, they're already putting all the infrastructure in place, the FedNow accounts, which we should talk about, how they're positioning everybody into them. But going back to the mortgages, you know, when you look at what's happened to mortgages historically, there is a big, huge crisis. Now think about 2008 and the crisis, and all of a sudden you couldn't pay your mortgage. Well, what did they do? They went ahead and they offered you the ability to convert that mortgage into terms that frankly are more in the bank's favor. All right, we'll just accrue this interest, put it on the back, so you end up owing a whole lot more money when you think it's for, they kind of make it look a little bit like it's to your benefit. Like in Canada, they're now talking about 90-year mortgages, right? So that you can make that mortgage payment. And also historically, what they will do is they will index those mortgages to whatever the inflation rate is. And I'm talking about during a hyperinflationary event. So you never get out of debt unless you have a severely undervalued real money, which is gold, which they have to suppress the visible price because a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. And once you really get that, like you and I, we make completely different choices, right? And you do get more out of the system. However, you know, this is severely undervalued. So all you really have to do is you take your mortgage, and like at ITM, frankly, we have the calculations of what the historic norm is, and we can calculate out what the true fundamental value of an ounce of gold and an ounce of silver are. It's not rocket science. It's just this is real money, and this stuff is just fake money. And so however much of this they created, the true value of the gold is to hold your purchasing power even. And when they do those overnight revaluations, they take something that has no intrinsic value, this crap, it's only used in one place, and they revalue it against real money that's all intrinsic value because it's used in every sector of the global market. And so that's when you will see gold start to express to its true value, which is probably at least 15 grand or more, because the more debt they create, the higher the fundamental value. So in the strategy going back to the mortgages, what you'll do is when they do that overnight revaluation, that's when you grab a little bit of it and you pay that mortgage off before it gets to the point of them wanting to reset your mortgage into terms that are a whole lot less favorable to you. They don't really want to force you. They could force you, but they don't really want to do it because then you're more likely to fight back. If you think it's your fault that you're failing, just like so many people in 2008 did, then you go along with it, but you're not pointing a finger blaming anybody else. So it's really an easy way to get your house paid off, really, frankly, like that. And what might take you, 10 of these right now might take you a quarter of an ounce by the time that happens. I don't know, but that's how you do it. You plan for it so that you are not under their thumb. You just, boom, pay it off, and you're going to still have to pay property taxes. So that's another thing that you plan for with gold. But for that, I like more the smaller pieces of gold, the fractional. Let me see.
Do you think the property taxes would go hyperinflation also?
Oh, they do. History shows us absolutely, because how do governments generate income? Through fees and taxation, but mostly through taxation. And so you have to have the ability to always pay your taxes. I mean, even during the Depression, you could have had your house fully paid off. But if you didn't pay your property taxes, you still lost your house. So these are the risks that real estate runs, but that you can account for with gold. I mean, I kind of like these, and I don't even know what's available. So you can't go by that with me because that's not what I do anymore. But like I have a bunch of these French roosters or Swiss francs or British sovereigns. And so we can calculate out based upon your current taxes, based upon your current mortgage, how much and what kind of gold you need to make sure that you can always cover those property taxes and pay that mortgage off like that.
Are taxes going to hyperinflate too, or is the government going to come out with some random new bill passed in the middle of the night, a day before Christmas, like they did with the Federal Reserve formation? Nobody was in session, and then start to put capital gains taxes on your gold and silver sales as you pay off your home?
Well, they already have those on there, right? If you hold a stock for over a year, and don't hold me to this because I'm not a tax accountant, but I believe that your taxable event is something like 20%. But with physical gold and silver, your taxable event is 28%. So they're already doing that to incentivize you into the stock market and incentivize you away from gold, because they know that that's what's going to protect you. So would they get more onerous than that? Yes. But I'm going to tell you at this juncture, I'll say a few things about it. At this juncture, I can still buy and sell these completely privately, though of course all good citizens always pay all taxes that are due. But this is a very invisible circumstance, right? And the central banks know it. That's why they don't want you to hold it, right? You hold it, you own it outright, it runs no counterparty risk. But even if they do tax you, it's not going to be 100%. Unless they do an overt confiscation, and they've already been doing covert confiscation since the day you and I were born, and wherever, whenever it was that you were born, they're doing it to you too. Inflation is a confiscation of your work and your wealth. They just don't want to call it a confiscation, but it is. So if there is an overt confiscation, and I don't own bullion, so I don't have any that I could show you. But I don't know. I'm thinking that you want to be in the category of the same guys that write the laws and the rules. So that's in that 1% category, which you can't get with bullion because that's monetary gold. So that's new stuff. but you can get it with collectible gold coins, which were exempt from confiscation the last time because of who wrote the laws, and they knew what they were doing. So that's why personally, I don't own any bullion. I just have the collectible coins in different forms because it depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. But this is just a raw 1 ounce piece of gold, but the date on this is 1889. Guess what? That's my collection and I qualify for that. So you have to be strategic about it.
Yeah, because if they deem that unsellable again, or okay, every time you trade that in, somebody does have to fill out paperwork that it's changed hands.
Yeah.
You know, what's a bank going to do if you walk in with 200,000 cash to pay off the rest of your loan on your house and be like, well, where'd you get that? I found it in the stream after a flood. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, is it really their business? I mean, they could make a law that you have to disclose. But David, are they training us into it? You brought up the masks. That whole part was about, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, it was to see how far you could push people. But look at China, which you know China really well. And, you know, the fact that they've had more rioting, more uprisings, more protests recently in this last year than they have in decades, that gives me hope. Because once the public really rioted against the lockdowns, especially in November, there were a lot of rioting for that. Then they changed the rules and they opened everything up in December. Is that a coincidence, or does that prove to you that there are more of us than there are of them? And if they want to stay in power, they do have to bend to a degree to our will if we stand together.
That happened here too. As soon as there was a lot more pushback and people starting to organize and saying was, you know, signs on the streets and say, you know, I'm not wearing my mask, call the police on me in your store. Once a huge amount of people started to roll into that, you notice here too, it just ended in like a day. Everything was done, plexiglass down, go about your lives again, and just pick up the pieces and good luck. But it did stop at that point when enough people said stop. This time around, I'm curious how it's going to go. There's a lot of things I could say, but I can't really say them here.
I know.
About how it might go or what might be the cause of it. It's unfortunate it's coming back again because you mentioned China. Let's talk about the food losses in China. They had, you know, the biggest floods, at least in 400 years. You know, their records go back some 4,000 years, but what they can reliably say is that hurricane and typhoons, excuse me, the system of typhoons that went up there 2 in a row. And then they already had some, you know, catastrophic flooding from just regular, what you consider cloud cells bunching on themselves in these rivers from the sky in the same areas. They've lost an enormous amount of crops. So they're already back out on the market trying to purchase a huge, huge amount of wheat. Now the corn, I'm sure they lost quite a bit, but they're not purchasing as much corn. The problem is the carryover stocks for this year. And I encourage you to go out and take a look at the USDA charts. That's the United States Department of Agriculture. They were showing zero for the carryover stock for the 2022-23 year, meaning we used all of what was grown last year and they don't have any extra in the silos. Now there's seed shortage coming up, and I have some numbers. Normally they grow about 800,000 acres just for seed. But this year, with the losses so far and the drought and this sort of thing, they might come clean with like about 180,000 for seed, and that's going to be for the seed wheat. So I don't know how we're going to grow a wheat crop with 4 times less seed coming in for the following season here in the United States. And the durum wheat not coming. They already stated that if you're a durum wheat buyer, you're not going to have enough for what you need for your company. So to go to a secondary source or change your product, but then you go over to the FDA and they're allowing all these product changes inside, as long as it's not a drastic change. If you're selling a barley biscuit and it comes in with wheat, well, you have to change that. But going from durum wheat to like soft winter wheat, they're not going to require a label change on that. The amount of food that's lost to Ukraine, I had some good numbers, about 12%, 12% of the fields will be planted and had been that can be harvested. And the numbers that are coming in, these tidal waves of grain are being pushed back from the EU and they can't export. So everywhere you look across the world right now, there's a huge, huge deficit in food production. And the droughts and the fires up in Canada, they're looking at 50% reductions in the wheat and the barley crop up there. So everywhere you look, and now you got China, one of the most voracious buyers on the planet, out buying literally as much as it can at any cost over basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're bidding up the premiums to get it because they need it that badly. So what that means in English is they're paying more than the market price for it. So, and then when we come into this at the end of the year and they start announcing all these losses and all these huge yield reductions, you can only just see the price of food go in one direction. Mm-hmm. And then what's that going to do if we're in another set of lockdowns and then your food price is skyrocketing and then the availability is not there? And I believe, just from this is my own feeling, they're going to start locking up the stores this time. Just my gut feeling and a few conversations I've had, it's going to get very different than last time. So, with all these things that we see in the economy and availability of food, this could be a pivotal year to twist the civilization as we know it.
Well, I think you could be right. And you made mention a little bit earlier about how every time you go in to buy feed for your animals, that you're seeing that price go up and up. I haven't. We just finished putting in the orchards. So I have a production orchard and a kitchen orchard. And one of my domes, my geodesic dome grow houses, is planted out. The other two are ready. They're ready. We can plant them out at a moment's notice. But we're also starting to lay in large fields of wheat and of barley, so we can feed our animals and also make bread and things like that. But I agree with you a bazillion % that food, and food is the biggest issue as we're making these financial transitions as well. It's the biggest issue, and we've got to be as self-sufficient and independent in that. And I would say, yes, start growing that stuff if you have enough space to do it, because you've got to feed the animals. And we're working on that too, to get completely away from being dependent upon the system. Because
I have two more crops to add into your list there.
Okay. And Randy, would you write that down?
Millet. And one of my favorites is the Japanese silver millet. Oh. Buckwheat and sorghum.
Like both of those. Yeah.
So these are the ancient grains for anybody not really aware out there. They're commercial crops, but they're just, literally a fraction of the total, grains grown across the world here. You can still find buckwheat, millet, sorghum, amaranth, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there's more protein content in these crops for your animals. And then the sorghum, you can make bread. And we're really going to have to start to get more self-sufficient. And then, setting up these bartering and trading hubs, if you will. Because I'm trying to already, and have been for a year or more, thinking outside money. So if I can trade with somebody a thing for a thing, I always go that direction. And we've been raising some sheep, and I've been able to trade those off to get something else for the sheep that we raised. We put the 5 months in, fattened them up, and then be able to trade that on as a much more valuable product at that time, and starting to know more of the local farmers around. If you don't know that, if you don't know where your food's coming from, there's no way.
You need to. I think everybody needs to go out and create those relationships now, today, because in crisis, you're not going to have the ability really to create those relationships. We haven't really, we've got the chickens and the turkeys, but the barn is not yet complete enough and the fencing up enough for the livestock. But I'm hoping that everything holds together till the spring. And I think that's when we're going to start laying in the livestock. And I got to ask you, do I look like a flippin' farmer? But I am absolutely.
It's not the look, it's the attitude.
My brother, he said it the other night. We went out for dinner and he goes, "Where did this come from?" I have another sister that is also doing a little farm, a small farm, and she's been making cheese. So she has the cows and everything as well. And he goes, where did this come from? I said, well, I can tell you from me, it's looking at the economy and really believing and understanding what's happening. And I know food is the biggest issue for most people. And if you're hungry and all your wealth is held inside of the system and they say no, you tell me what your options are.
You have a choice in today's unstable world. Eat the bugs or plan ahead. Eat the bugs or buy the storable foods. When a disaster strikes, we may find ourselves confined to our homes or shelters for days or weeks. In such situations, having a bugs.
I'll tell you a story, and I can tell you how scary it was, not because the people themselves, but the situation, how scary it was. Somebody drove off the road, and you have to drive over 1,000 feet up our driveway, past two no trespassing signs that are right in the middle of the gravel driveway. And they came up, and it was a mother with like a, say, 16, 17-year-old teenage daughter, and then two younger kids. They're like 10 years old. And they drove up. They're like, oh, we're looking for our lost dogs. And I'm like, no, you're not. You definitely don't belong here. And you're snooping around. And I was thinking, they weren't armed and they weren't a threat and they weren't starving and they weren't knocking on my door. But, thinking in the future, that would be terrifying. You got those four knocking on the door. I mean, how many people are you going to have to turn away? And that, it's just, some of these things that we never thought the choices you're going to have to make. Like you need to know when you need to execute on your silver or gold sale to be able to pay off that fiat mortgage or bills or car loan or whatever you're going to pay off with it. But you're also going to have a plan that's already in your head on what you're going to do when people start arriving at your property or what's going to happen in some of these scenarios, because I wasn't expecting them to just drive up and then pop out of the car like that at the same time. And not only that, but there was no males there. It was just, the little kid. I think one of them were like 10-year-old when you really can't tell if they're boy or girl, or sort of right in that range of looks. But that's a scary one to think about. And, if your money is not going to buy something and, a mother goes off to the store or to the ATM or to the bank, and now, there's a lot of cash limit withdrawals. You're starting to see them everywhere.
Yeah.
What are you going to do as a mother or a father with your kids if you really can't get money? Then what? See, people just twist. They're gonna start behaving strangely at that point, because if you have no choice, you're going to do things of choices you never thought you had to do, and that scares me even more. When the money turns off, then what?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you better have some skills. Honestly speaking, and I probably shouldn't say this kind of thing, but I personally don't think I could turn anybody away that was hungry. I just wouldn't. So all of that, you can leave it in, but all of the planning that I've been doing is to feed a lot of people. And even here in Central Phoenix, which when people start to get crazy, it is probable that they could make some stupid choices. And I can't control whether or not they're going to destroy the gardens, but I completely plan. I'm on a corner and it's a half an acre. I don't have a lot, big lot, but for here, that's a lot. And I planted out the whole exterior of my property so that if that mother comes with her babies, she can pick some food. If she even knows, this is what's interesting, if she even knows what food actually growing in the ground looks like. Because we have been trained to not really know that. I had a friend over one day and we were harvesting lettuce and I am like, oh my God, this is so gorgeous. Oh my God, this is so gorgeous. And she told me afterwards that when I said that, she looked at me like I was crazy because there was a little brown on some of the lettuce leaves, right? Because when you go to the grocery store, they look perfect. Right. But that's not the way real food grows, but that's what they've trained into us. So I think that the problem with food is even going to be greater than that if people don't learn what food is or how to forage in the city, which I know we've got an upcoming episode on Beyond Gold and Silver in that, because I have a new farm manager who I love, 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 love. And she knows how to forage in the country as well as the city. And I think that's going to be such an important skill because not many people have food gardens. I grow most of my food as well, working on 100% because we might well have to be at 100%.
For how long do you think that would last, though? Let's say we committed this contagion, money flips, the CBDCs don't work, and then we're going to revert back to, gold and silver, copper rounds. I don't know if those will be worth anything or not going forward, like 1 ounce punch stamp copper rounds or 5 ounce copper bars, something like that. But I mean, really, in reality, how long do you think this contagion or this crisis would last economically? Because
I mean, we've got a huge transition to make because this is social, economic, as well as financial. I think that there are a couple of parts to it. There's the part where everything gets shut down either because the grid goes down or they decide to cut things off or what have you. And I think that will be shorter than this whole transition. It's hard to say. This is going to last longer to make the complete transition than it is in that first shock and awe part of it. But we can look down in Venezuela and Argentina and other places to see the problems that they're having with food and how that's actually lasted, or Zimbabwe lasted for many, many years, which is why if you have the ability to grow food, that's the choice to make because then it's just ongoing. Plus, the soil, the water, everything. But as far as how long it's going to take for the whole thing, I mean, it could, honestly, David, I've planned my barterable portfolio for 10 years. That's what I planned my barterable portfolio for. So what's that tell you? This is not an easy transition. This is like the Industrial Revolution. We're in the digital revolution and things are changing in society, in the economy, and as well as in the financial system. This is not going to be an easy thing for anybody. It's not. It's going to be very challenging and more so here in the US.
So I have a Zimbabwe story for you. I traveled in Zimbabwe in 1994. The exchange rate then was 10 Zim dollars for a US dollar. And then, by the time we left, like 2 weeks later, it had gone up. It was like 12 Zim to a dollar. And then it was 15 Zim by the time we got back into South Africa. So we could see that it was kept rolling up, like every month or so it was going up, 10, 20% in the exchange rate, which is interesting. And now you look at the hundreds of millions for a dollar compared to what? So then with being BRICS, they're jumping over onto the BRICS aligned currency nations, and they're going to be backing their assets with gold. And they're also adding gold in and getting reserves based on their gold from Zimbabwe, being a gold producer, which leads me to the next question. So a lot of people think that, the world has to split into two cells that have split. And, we get exactly 50% of this and 50% of this, and then America might have a problem. But I was just wondering what you think. With the BRICS aligned nations, like how many of them need to start trading amongst themselves and taking away that dollar share before we really start to see something, maybe not catastrophic happening, but definitely noticeable enough, like that's not going or boding well. Like, I don't think it's going to be 50% myself. I think the numbers are going to be far less, and something's going to start, hitting that dollar like bang, 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 and it's just, I'm saddened to see how the way that this monetary policy is going in America, and how we are going to not be able to purchase much. It's almost like every dollar I get now, I don't even want to hold on to it, except something to make it a tangible thing.
Right.
Another piece of machinery, another solar panel, another whatever, just to get rid of it. So I have something hard in front of me here, like a hard good, the table. I'd rather buy another table than give my money away.
Right, because the table holds its value more than the currency does. But, when you stop and think about it, we've held the title of the world reserve currency since the early 70s. And at that point, what that really meant was if you were a government or a corporation or certainly an individual, going anywhere. Like you had to convert your dollars or whatever currency you were using at that time into Zimbabwe dollars. And so in order to buy oil or lumber or steel or food or anything, you had to use US dollars. But those days started to shift in 2000. So even though it looks like it would drop off at a knife cliff, the last numbers that I saw, don't hold me to this because I don't have them right in front of me, but I believe that we're already down to something like 41% of dollars being held in reserves. And so there has essentially been a run on the dollar. We just don't see it yet, and we are hanging on by a thread. And keep in mind that the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, back in the 60s, created their currency called the SDR, just stands for Special Drawing Rights. That's a basket of currencies, but they built the infrastructure to take over as the world reserve currency. It's just that Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and created the petrodollar, so we held on to that stance. But talking about the BRICS, Saudi Arabia is wanting to join the BRICS nation. That, I think, would really be the death knell of the dollar, because even though that's been shifting for quite a number of years, really since 2000, as far as our retaining the world reserve currency status, there's now a lot more reserve currencies. And certainly in a basket of currencies, they could put every currency in it. So I do think that makes the most sense to become the world reserve currency, because then you can have a local currency as well as an international currency, and making cross-border transactions much more simple, which is what they're trying to do at the BRICS nation. But I don't know that it's a percentage as much as it is, what do you think would happen if Saudi Arabia realigned with and taking all the oil producing nations with them? I mean, Russia's the plus and OPEC plus. So we're kind of already there. I think that would be the death knell of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. And when you keep in mind that the IMF has already set up what's called a substitution fund, so any country that's still holding dollar assets could make that deposit into the substitution fund, and then the IMF would wash it and convert it into an SDR denominated instrument or asset, so bond or what have you. That would accomplish a few things. Number one, if that did indeed happen, in theory, they could then regulate the rate and speed at which the dollars came home. And therefore, in theory, they could regulate the rate and speed of the new inflation coming in from that sector. I'm not really sure that they have the ability to control it yet, because it really is all about confidence, since this whole big thing is a con game. Which is why when I hear that people have come together and there's been change, it gives me a lot of hope. Because we can't just sit here and allow them to take the rest of our freedoms and destroy the future of our children, which is what I'm fighting for, is the future of my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. But, you know, on top of all of that, I think we've done just an outstanding job, and I'm being facetious, with, pardon me, but pissing off the rest of the world. Because we've used the financial system, the SWIFT system, so the global payment system, as a weapon. And everybody has paid attention. So, you know, I think that here in the US, even though it's not official, to be honest with you, I think that we have really lost our status as the world reserve currency. And I think it's going to get worse for Americans because we're not used to it.
USA, number one. Number one in hyperinflation. I can make a rhyme
we'll
out
show
of
them. Yeah, we'll show number one in hyperinflation. But you've lived in a lot of countries. You've traveled quite a bit. and the standard of living that we've enjoyed, because we were for many years the only country that could print and create from debt the money they needed to pay their bills. I think those days are fast coming to a close. Very, very fast.
Yeah. So what kind of indicator is it when treasury bills go up for auction and 40% of them remain unsold like the last auction, and then we had to remonetize that, but just printing money to buy them ourselves?
Exactly.
So I mean, at what point again does it roll
you.
over into, whoa, we got a serious problem? Is it ever going to go to 100% of nobody wants to buy it and we have to just print all the money to rebuy our own treasury bills here?
The answer is yes. I mean, the answer is yes. That used to be what third world countries did. But we actually started buying back our own treasuries 2000, the end of 2000. And you can go on the Federal Reserve Fred, FRED, and put in their treasuries owned by the Fed. And you can see clearly when they started buying back their treasuries. So that's already been, how do you go bankrupt? Slowly at first and then quickly. And that's what we're going to have here as well. And the answer is yes, I do think that you will have nobody that wants those bonds. And take a look at what's happening in the interest rate markets these days. Supposedly we got inflation under control. Well, then interest rates should not be spiking. But because they really haven't gotten interest rates under control, and the markets don't believe them anymore, and they are absolutely fighting the Fed, and every country is monetizing the debt. It's not just the US, but we're supposed to be an advanced economy. So we shouldn't have to do that. But yes, I mean, that alone shows you the shift. And with the interest rates spiking and all of these bank downgrades, that should show you where we are in this whole trend cycle. I mean, I can't say that it's going to be Tuesday morning at 8:35, but it could be. So get those fields in for your livestock.
Yeah, one last question for you. Thank you for spending your time. I had a few questions of my own and others that have written in that knew I was going to have you on the show that asked. So let's say we come into this event, there should be some pre-warning, but if you start to exit, into your gold and then try to move those funds and get your mortgage paid off, it's going to take a good 6 weeks to get all that kind of final paperwork back to you. Like, what kind of bottlenecks could you envision of everybody trying to shift funds, move funds, convert things, ask for the paperwork from banks that may just close, bank holiday. Sorry, that was 3 business days. We told you to be, 21 business days. Sorry, that's 3 more than we could. Like, is there a possibility, of just so many people moving so much money and converting to try to get out of these fiat that the entire system could lock up on itself in some sort of massive bottleneck where nothing can get paid off during that time on purpose from the bank side? Because I know a lot of people are going to run to do that. Or is that just, there's not enough people that have gold to even worry about?
I was just going to say that, there's not enough people. And if you're working with ITM Trading, you're holding it yourself. So you're not going to have to go to the bank to get it. You're going to hold it yourself. And then, could there be bottlenecks? Absolutely. But again, I mean, there's not enough people that own gold that would probably create that bottleneck. But also understand that by the time that happens, you're going to have demand for this stuff through the roof. Because right now, they think, not the markets and not other central banks, but the public is still unaware of how little control the central bankers really have. And we're witnessing that loss of control in Japan, who's really been the forerunner to all of these great experiments, central bank experiments, QE, YCC. I mean, it's the whole alphabet soup of garbage that they put together. And I'm watching them break down and lose control right now. The only thing that's keeping this together is public confidence. And when they created this system, what they said that people marry the legal money of the state and cannot but help think that this would not regain some of its value into the future, but it never does. And that is by design. So I can't tell you when, but I can tell you that I'm rushing as fast as I can to get everything as completed as I can, because it could happen anytime. That's how fragile this system is. Honestly, it could happen anytime. And I got news for you, but the BRICS are as fragile as the US. This is a global issue. Nobody, nowhere is going to be immune from this, which is why it is so important to create these communities so we can come together and get through this. But, really with the mortgage, I mean, could there be a bottleneck? I mean, anything could happen. But if history repeats itself similarly to what's happened in the past, if you do that with that major overnight revaluation, you're going to be able to liquidate. And and how much are you going to look to liquidate? Maybe, I don't know. In Venezuela, it went up 3,500% overnight. So might take you a quarter of an ounce of gold to liquidate. But people aren't going to be rushing to pay off their mortgages because they're not going to have the money to do it. If you hold gold, you'll have the money to do it. And you got a better shot. You got a much better shot. And it's out of the system. Get out of the system as much as you can. I know we can't completely, because this thing is still the tool of barter. That's most recognizable. But then if you keep your wealth in that, then you'll have nothing, because 1 trillion times zero is zero. People will run to the stock market, they'll run to the bond market, but those are all dollar denominated. Those aren't going to help you.
But 0 times 0 is 0, but if I add a 0, it should be worth something, right?
Yeah, another 0.
Yeah, the confidence. Yeah, you see, you're gaining something. Like the confidence lost. I'm really thinking, we come into this second lockdown here. That is going to be a confidence loser in a second. People are just going to give up hope. Like, please consider trying to get yourself ready as we sign. Yeah, they're going to be really angry.
It's not, I had this conversation with Eric, and he's like, well, it's inevitable. But you can choose whether or not you use that CBDC. You vote with your wallet. Understand, this is what people really have to understand. Your power is in the purse. It's in the wallet. That's how you vote. So if you stay in the system and your assets are all dollar denominated and you're dependent upon the grocery store, that's your vote. But if you start and make sure that you have food security and energy security and all of that, if you buy gold and silver, that's your vote. This is my vote. And as well as all the prepping. And I mean, you were instrumental in the in-house prepping if we can't grow outside. So I have in-house grow beds down here in Central Phoenix, and I have inside grow beds definitely up at the bug out location. And I want to thank you for that, because I think it's critical.
Well, thanks. That's a big statement. And,
I've made that statement before. Actually many, many times, that I owe that to you. Absolutely, 100%.
I just owe it to the other people who I've been doing research too. And it's just all about sharing all the research. Like, you got to, realize, like, Lynette, all she does is research. That's all I do research too. And the time I spend when I have free time, I'm out banging around on my farm here. But if both of us are coming at this going, we got a problem on this side, and it's two different angles, but it's coming down to the same kind of end result. So if you're going to vote with your phone, get a phone call over there to ITM Trading and see how they can help you out, because time seems to be really critical right now. The information I'm sort of being drip fed at the moment seems like this one is going to be nasty, and a lot of people aren't going to be ready. And especially if I'll just say one last thing. They were talking about closing the supermarkets because they can't guarantee the food safety because of this new whatever. You're going to cough on the vegetables, you're going to cough on a can, whatever. Like they tried to scare everybody in the beginning. But isn't it just magical that appeal and all these food coating new adjuvants have come out during this time, and they'll probably be mandated that everything has to be covered in appeal. Even the Campbell's soup can needs to have some sort of micro coating on it. And I could just see the way it's moving down now. So it is
And
time to
it's
get more than ready. I mean, if ultra ready is, I wish I were there, but I know people have been getting ready for 20 years that aren't there yet. I just think it's just going to be on the job training. Like it's going to stop one day, and what you have for resources is what you have. And hopefully you prepared the best you can. So Lynette, I thank you for having me on or talking to me today. Any final thoughts?
Wow, just don't procrastinate. I see too many people that go, oh, well, I don't like the premiums or I don't like this or buy gold. It's because you're still putting more value in this than you are to food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. That's where your value is in I call it my mantra because that's how I built everything is around those, because that's what we need to secure a reasonable standard of living. And that community part, I mean, your gold and your silver is your foundation, and that's your wealth shield. But the community and coming together with all the different skill sets. So maybe you haven't been farming, but hey, maybe you know how to lay irrigation, or maybe you're a good carpenter, or you're a great baker, or something like that. So I think it's a great time to develop more skill sets that you can bring to the table to barter with. When you find somebody like wonderful David Dubine that's growing the food, now you bring something of value to the table that you can share. Community is arguably, in my opinion, the single most important part of this whole piece, because there's a lot of strength in numbers. And just say no, but get yourself into a position where you can say no and do it now, because this is the time to get prepared. Once the crisis hits, it's too late. You're done. What are you going to do?
Hope nobody has to go through that. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of our conversation that can help you really get prepared and at least maybe plant the seed to you. Maybe you want to do more information yourself on truly what's happening or how easy it is to, purchase metals and things that you might need. It's not as difficult to get solar panels as you think. You can order them online if you need to. But anyway, bye for now.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives, ITM Trading is a precious metals company that has been in business for over 27 plus years with a mission to educate and empower individuals to hedge against inflation, mitigate financial risk, and prepare for the Great Reset. ITM Trading has spent the more than 27 years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. Your journey starts with a strategy that will educate and empower you to thrive during the current economic crisis. These resources have been developed for the sole purpose of equipping you with the knowledge you deserve regarding the truth of our volatile financial system. ITM Trading was born out of our founder, Craig Griffin's principle that it takes more work to be honest and to educate people, but it's the right way to do business. Over 27 plus years. And still, we are family-led. By leaning into Craig's words and prioritizing relationships over transactions, we've continued evolving. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call. Dial the digits, 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.